This is Jonathan Lane from Fan Film Factor, and today I am here with the one and only Mark Edward Lewis, who is currently the co-director of the upcoming Axanar sequels, hopefully to be released sometime this year. That's 2024, folks. Uh, And Mark was also my sound designer on Interlude, so he has had quite an Axanar pedigree. In fact, he was actually one of the sound people on the original Prelude to Axanar. He also worked on Star Trek Phase 2 / New Voyages. Let me first say welcome to Fan Film Factor, Mark. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you. It's fun to be here.
Now, I know your work on Axanar, and I have obviously the Icarus Factor that you've just come out with, which is amazing. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I don't remember exactly what you did on Star Trek New Voyages Phase 2, but you did a lot of stuff there as well, right?
Yeah, I was introduced to Phase 2 back when it was Phase 2 with World Enough in Time and when they were shooting George Takei in Los Angeles. So I was actually, they brought me on because that was the dawn of digital cinematography and no one had a good method for making sure the cards, back when we had cards, it used to be tape or film, but then we would take a card, shoot it, put it on a computer, erase it, and then bring it back. And everybody was freaking out about, well, how do we make sure? I had actually been a director of photography on a couple of television shows. And so they using the method. So I had these crazy protocols. And so I ended up being a camera op and kind of head of data management for that production. I got to meet George. And then after I met Alec Peters, thanks to Richard Hatch in 2013, then we redid the post-production on Katoomba, and that was for sure New Voyages at that point. And then
That
also
it was Phase 2 by then, actually.
Phase
It started
2.
as New Voyages and then went to Phase 2.
Well, it ended up New Voyages. So
Oh, that's true. Well, we
those,
went back. Yeah, we went back
I
to
know
New
it.
Voyages for
Who
that
knows?
one
But
episode. Yeah,
it was
okay.
both. But by the time I came on at the end in the teens, it was definitely back to New Voyages. So Katoomba, and then they brought me on to direct Mind Sifter, and then I directed Formative Destiny and brought on my good buddy Richard Hatch, and then we ended up doing post-production on reposting Holiest Thing. So we've had a lot of work with the James Cawley folks, and I love them.
And I know that some people out there are going to ask because Torment of Destiny, which is one of the last filmed roles that Richard Hatch did, still remains unreleased
Yep.
at this point. Is that ever going to see the light of day as a final edited fan film? Do you know?
Well, I do know.
You do know.
Officially, the answer is no, but that's fortunately I don't run in the official realms.
Ooh. All righty. So I guess if I ask you anything more, you're going to have to kill me, right?
Well, I certainly can't say for or against other than that because
Okay.
there's a lot there's far in the world of IDIC, infinite diversity with infinite combinations. You would expect that everybody would be a yes, but politically, there's nothing more charged than fan films and Star Trek. So,
Oh God, help me. Yeah.
We'll just keep it tight-lipped on that one.
All righty. Now, speaking of nothing being more politically charged than fan films, I need to ask you the question that is on a lot of people's minds about the Icarus maneuver, which is how does it fit into Axanar and what Alec is allowed to release in terms of the settlement with Paramount and CBS? Because this is obviously an Axanar story. Alec wrote it. Alec stars in it. You directed it. You were also directing Axanar sequels. Is this a part of the Axanar sequels? Like the Vulcan scene was going to be a part of Prelude. How interconnected is this with Axanar?
Okay, that's a great question. So, unlike the Vulcan scene, which is definitely, it was always a part of Axanar. It's a part of the whole thing. We a part of the lore. Robert directed it, and I mean, it's really the next thing after Prelude. Really, this is a part of the Axanarian universe, but it's not a part of the Axanarian production. Granted, we're using Axanar production staff and actors, and Alec wrote it, but I'm producing it. And so I haven't actually read the the ruling from CBS, but I do know that there are some stipulations that the Axanar production has that other fan films don't. Namely, they're doing 2 episodes and that's all they can do. And I haven't done any. So this will be my first as a producer, officially. So it's its own story. And what's really great, if you've played any of the FOSSA games, Starship Combat Simulator, any of those other things that I did when I was a kid with my brother, you know that it's an incredibly rich universe. I mean, 4 years is a long time. We talk about the 5-year mission. Well, this is 4 years of war. And you know, since you produced Interlude, I mean, you have a incredibly pivotal moment in the Star Trek, the Axanar universe where, hey, Ramirez is in deep trouble. We got to get him out of here. And so, and well done, by the way. And
Thank you.
well
Well done as
awarded.
well. You made it sound amazing, my
Thank
friend.
you. Well awarded to you. So this is not as pivotal a moment, except that it's really one of the first times that the Ares class starship, newly minted off of the, whatever. I actually don't know. I don't think there was Utopia Planitia shipyards back then, but wherever it came out of.
It still had that new starship smell, though.
It had that smell on the leather. I'm telling you, the vinyl. They engaged not just one D6, but multiple D6s. And that was not something any starship had survived. And so we get to see a lot of things, not just what the Ares can do, which we see, but also what the crew of the Ares can do. And of course, Garth of Izar, some of his ingenuity. So it's very exciting. It's brief. It's like less than 6 minutes long, but it's a lot of fun. And I always love starship stuff. So when I was offered the story to direct, I'm like, this is my kind of story. And for those of you who watched Mindsifter, and you know the big ship battle that happens at the end between the D7 and the Enterprise, you're like, wow, that's a maneuver I never thought of before. I'm like, well, yeah, well, my brother and I used to do that in Starship Combat Simulator all the time to figure out what's the best engagement between those two. And so I love starship stuff. In fact, starships are more Star Trek to me than the characters, than the people. So that when, the Enterprise is as much a character as anybody in Star Trek to me.
I would definitely agree with that. Okay, so what's the origin story behind the Icarus maneuver? How did this come to be from not being anything to being an actual release fan film?
Well, I don't know all of the ins and outs because a lot of it was when I was dormant in the production. I've been with the production longer than anybody except Alec, but there were many years there in the middle of the lawsuit where development was happening with Alec and folks, and I wasn't involved with that. So I do know that at one point it was a part of the original script, the 2-hour script, and then it wasn't. I know it's a part of the audio drama. Because I know all the lines that we recorded on the day are also been recorded at Dana Wagner's studio for the audio drama. So it's definitely in the story. It wasn't some rando thing that Mark came up with. It's definitely something that is in the lore of the overall story that we're gonna tell but can't now. And also the progress of it was then obviously it sat on the shelf because in the process of the resulting 15-minute episodes, everything had to get pared down. And at one point in the we called them the assemblies, where we just took text from the script and put it on a screen and had timing and did stupid voiceovers. We realized, gosh, can we get Icarus maneuver, that thing that happens, can we get it in here? We're like, no, we can't. There's just no way. It's 6 minutes on a 15-minute. There's just not. It doesn't propel the story forward enough of the whole Axanar drama to warrant that much real estate in the limited time we had. So I don't remember if it was Alec or I, but one of us said, it's probably Alec. He's probably like, well, let's just make it its own thing. And I'm like, well, yeah, but we can't do more than 2. And he's like, well, you do it. I'm like, what do you mean me do it? And so I was like, yeah, he's like, yeah, you should produce this. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea.
I mean, the precedent's there. I mean, Interlude, the Interlude's origin story is kind of the same way in that Interlude came from what was essentially just a 1.5-minute framing sequence that Alec had in his script for the first of the 15-minute sequels.
Yeah.
And I just decided to expand that because I was like, okay, this needs more. You got this bridge, you got to have some, scenes filmed on it or whatever. And so, I took that and just expanded it into interlude and, produced it separately from Alex. So, I mean, I suppose there's definitely a precedent for having a different producer take a portion of Axanar and make it, as its own little cohesive, following the guidelines fan film.
Well, and yours is like a proper long form, as far as long form in the guidelines. I mean, it's not like 5 minutes.
Actually, you'd be surprised.
Really?
The total runtime of Axanar with closing credits, so Axanar interlude, is 12 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's twice as long as mine.
But that includes 3 minutes of closing credits. So it's actually about 6 minutes of the action sequence. And then that last little Alec flashback documentary part is about 2.5 to 3 minutes.
Oh, interesting. I guess that's true.
So we're both 6 minute men.
6 minute men.
We're 6 minute men. We last. Oh, okay, yeah. Actually, I have to be careful. Mark lives in Tennessee. They're a little more conservative there.
Yeah, well, I've gone live with Alec, so they're used to it now.
Okay, yeah. If anybody uses the swear word, the colorful metaphors, it's Alec.
Colorful metaphors, yeah. They're all like, no, they're fine. So yeah, so it was great, and we shot this at the very beginning of a schedule that was meant to shoot Axanar, but because it's not an interview, this thing is not at all like interviews. Much more like Axanar. It's much more like interlude, where it's live action. You're watching it go down. So we kind of had a completely different set of crew in there the day before we were going to shoot all the Axanar stuff on green screen and bridge. A completely different lighting setup, and I really wanted it to look like an underwater submarine battle. Like everybody's under red. When we dive, we go red, we go quiet, and we try to see what's going on. So we lit the bridge in a very, very un-Star Trek-like way, both in a yellow, we call it rig for yellow, rig for red, and rig for blue. So there's no rig for blue, I'll tell you, in Icarus. We're either at yellow alert or red. So, and I was blessed to have a really, really great Steadicam op who came in because we really wanted it to look like very few steady shots. Everything's moving, and it's anxiety, and it's difficult to watch, and everything's upset. So we had this guy Vince come in. He's probably 6'4", big Norwegian dude. And then if you've ever seen a full steady rig, it's another 6-7 inches outside of your body. And when you see the set on camera, you're like, oh, it's a nice big set. But it isn't. You've been there. That is not a big set. Yeah. Not comparatively to like the if you go to James Cawley's set in New York, you're like, this is a lot more room here than there is on the Ares version of the set. So here's this guy.
Well, one of the reasons for that, by the way, folks, is that James Cawley doesn't have a full 360-degree bridge.
Well, he does now.
He does now, but back when they used to film it, he didn't. And because the Ares bridge, originally the Ares bridge was meant to be modular, so you can pull stuff out like they used to be able to do in the original Star Trek. But those casters they collapse. You cannot wheel anymore. It is stuck there, and so you're completely surrounded. And because of that, you can't get your cameras back too far. I mean, I suppose you could, I guess sometimes you film through the door, like the turbolift shot when you open, but that's about as deep as you can get. Otherwise, you're basically like, excuse me, pardon me, and God forbid somebody's sitting at communications or whatever, you need to walk past them. They're like, okay,
Well, the big problem is the big problem in the Ares bridge is that unlike a Constitution bridge, you have navigation in the middle. So you have another console there, right? And that blocks everything. So it makes navigating when you're 6 foot, however, that he had to be 250 plus with a Steadicam rig. And we had two guys kind of wrestling him around when we're doing all this stuff. It was quite challenging, but it looks great. We got what we needed out of it. And
looks amazing.
Looks amazing.
I mean, you don't see very many fan films like that. I mean, every so often you'll get a little bit of, steady or unsteady, stuff. Is it called steady because it looks so unsteady? I was kind of wondering what the term is.
Well, it's sort of like Band-Aid. Nobody knows what to call a Band-Aid except the brand name. So a Steadicam is a brand name. It's not a, there's
Oh,
no
okay.
real name for it. It's called a Steadicam because it keeps your camera steady while you're jumping around. But
But basically, the concept is when you're going in and out or whatever, as opposed to having your camera on a tripod or just on a dolly where it's just going
right.
back and forth. So, this is you can be anywhere, and you don't usually see a lot of that in Star Trek fan films because it's very difficult to do. It's very challenging. I mean, I'm
And it's
guessing Vince.
expensive to have. There, it's
Yeah.
not like, and Vince he just got his rig and so I want to have something on my reel that's great. So he gave us a deal we couldn't refuse. And it was fantastic. So yeah.
And so he has experience doing the steady cam stuff, or is it
That
like
was
this is his
kind of
first?
one of his first gigs on it
Okay.
with it. So he was there the whole day before while we were prepping. He was prepping and trying it. And, so he spent a lot of time and, hats off to Vince if you watch this for doing some great work. And I hope this gets you a lot of work.
Yes, Vince. Fly, be free, be successful, live long and prosper,
Live long and prosper.
and live long and profit. That's the Ferengi version.
All the above.
But,
Yeah. Right.
so we're going to talk a little bit more about production in a sec, but I want to, be careful about the third rails of fan filmmaking. So I want to be very careful about stepping on this particular one. But there's a little bit of a controversy right now because it's Alec, it's Axanar. Of course, there's going to be controversy. And I know that Rob Burnett, who was the editor of the original Prelude to Axanar and was initially going to be the director of the Axanar sequels, has had some issues with the fact that I guess the visual effects footage of this was stuff that he helped conceive of. He plotted this out. Like, what is Rob saying, and what is he asking for? Has he asked you for anything? I mean, I think he wanted credit or something. He said he wasn't paid. What's going on here? If you could talk about it.
Well, Rob's a good friend, and he has been with me in the process of not only Axanar but other fan films. Like when we did Mind Sifter, there was a point at which, because I'm also an editor. He's a great editor. There was a point at which where I got stuck in the scene where Scotty's talking to McCoy, and there was a huge continuity issue where because they're all drinking and the glasses were wrong, and I was like, I don't know how to solve this. This looks, and most people, they're fan film, like, nobody cares. I'm like, I will never sleep unless this. So I called him. I'm like, dude, I need your help. He came over and he spent a couple hours. He goes, and he came up with a solution. He's like, oh, do this. What if we cut this? And that's what you're watching when you watch Mind Sifter is, Rob helping me out of a bad spot. So I consider
By
him
the
a
way,
friend.
I want to say something. By the way, and because I know that I'm not Rob's favorite person, but I want to say Rob is one of the most skilled editors. I think anywhere, and not just even in fan films. I think his ability to perceive a shot and to just edit stuff together, because he basically made Prelude what it was.
I mean, there is no success in Prelude without Rob. None.
Absolutely. So I
He
said something
built
nice
that
about Rob.
ending. The ending that you see is Rob, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, I got hats off, and yeah, a whole bunch of other political things that Rob and I both had to do to get that made from the director that was there at the time. So yeah, he was my partner in crime and grime, both doing Prelude, and yeah, so. I had zero issues with Rob, but I found out about this from third hand, him saying, "Oh, I'm going to have to sue Mark." And I'm like, what? Wait, what?
Sue you?
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to sue him," and everybody on the hater list
What
was
did
like,
you
"Yeah,
do?
you should sue him. You should sue him." And I'm like, "Well, it's a little passive aggressive, but I know everybody's got their thing." So I just reached out, and because he said, "Oh, I don't think I'm going to get credited," and "Oh, I was never paid." So I IM'd him on Facebook. I'm like, "Hey, man, I don't think we have any problems, you and I. So, if you want credit, I mean, I can give you special Starship direction credit. And look, I'll pay you personally if you want payment for. I mean, I'm not getting paid, but if you want money, we'll figure out some rate." But he hasn't responded yet in a way that says yes or no. There's just, I know he has a lot of hurt feelings, and honestly, if it were me and I had done a bunch of work and nobody was going to credit me, I would certainly be upset. But I'm coming to the end of my schedule, and so if I don't hear from him, I can't get him into the credits because we're going to release here in less than 10 days. So, but I'll put him in IMDb. I mean, whatever. I'm not here to make enemies. I like Rob. He's incredibly talented. I don't like that I was saddled with a bunch of visual effects shots that I didn't get to do anything about, because these were pre-made from many, many, many years ago. Not all of them, but some of them. So that's what I love most about sci-fi, is because I love Starship. So I love being able to work with the visual effects artists, and back in the day with Tobias, it was so amazing. And one of the things that I love about directing sci-fi is directing the sci-fi, the actual science fiction shots. And that's because, I love that's their characters to me. And back in the day when we were working with Tobias on Prelude, and then I also got to work with him on New Voyages. And then, of course, Blade of Honor, he did, I mean, such good work. So just to be able to work with the visual effects is so much fun for me, which I didn't get to do here. But I also know we probably wouldn't have had budget to do visual effects shots. So I'm grateful that there were shots. So I have no beef with Rob. I'm happy to help, but something's got to happen sooner than later, because
Yeah. I mean, obviously, this is not going to go live until after, it's that window closes. But
sure.
obviously, your offer is still there to put Rob on
Yeah.
IMDb. You can put him in the description of the video once it's posted on YouTube.
Yep.
I mean, so anyway, let's move on to the visual effects though, because you said, and I know a lot of these were done already, because
Mhm.
several years ago when Alec asked me to recut the Axanar trailer,
Mhm.
I saw all the visual effects that had already been created for Axanar. They're gorgeous. I mean, there's amazing visual effects that are out there
Yeah.
already. And so some of these I've seen before, like the scene where the Klingons are sort of mirroring each other, and
Mhm.
the scene where they throw the Klingon cell at the other ship. Of course, now
Mhm.
that's been done in Picard, but we did it first.
We
Uh,
did.
when I say we, I mean you, because I had nothing to do with it. But I mean fan film. But we were just too late in getting it done. But there were definitely shots that I had not seen before. So did you go back to the well to get new shots, visual effects shots from the original
Yeah.
creator?
Yeah. For the most part, there are well, there's a couple new ones, but not from the Starship side. If it's a Starship shot, it's been rehashed, retimed, and reused, recolored and reused, or used for the first time, because no one's actually used it in anything but the odd trailer that, for the feature films that aren't ever going to be made.
Yeah. And this is such wonderful footage there. But so how many shots did you have to do brand new that didn't exist before? Would you say?
Oh, brand new. 6. They're still getting finished, but mostly around the bridge. Most of them are bridge things that we have to fix. And of course, everything that's all of the console stuff, that has all been done by Dana Wagner, who built all that stuff. And the versions that you've seen as of this day are not what are going to be there. Those are just what ended up being on set.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I saw an initial cut. Some of us get to see it early. But the
Mhm.
thing with the original cut, the initial cuts is, it's obviously not the final. But even watching the rough cut that I saw wasn't I mean, picture lock version, but it was amazingly immersive. I mean, I sort of got this visceral feel. In fact, I told Mark and I am last night that I'd watched it again in a more zen way. I mean, the first time I was watching this, I was like, literally paying attention to every little detail. Oh, this is cool. That's cool. And I watched it again after that. And then a couple of days went by, and I watched it again. I just sort of like I went into a zen place. And I just sort of sat back and just absorbed it on almost a subconscious level. I was just watching the artwork of it.
Mm.
This the sound was washing over me like waves on the ocean.
Mm.
Um, and I was just thinking, it was so rich and it was so full, and you don't usually get this with a fan film because we're not really professional. Mark is, of course, I mean, you're a Hollywood person. I mean, you came from this, right? You actually had a career out here, right? I mean, let's talk about that for a moment. What were you doing before now? I know right now you're a financial guy and whatever, you've changed careers, but what was your career before this? What were you doing?
Well, all my degrees are in music of one form or another, and most of it biased toward film composing. And I wrote my first film score at 17, and I was a full-time film composer until my 30s. And then I branched into audio, sound design, mixing, re-recording. And then once I realized that that was important, I realized that most of what I was doing was fixing people's bad movies that they'd shot poorly. And so then I learned cinematography and directing and then producing and then started doing my own things in the early aughts, which, led me to uh, directing and winning awards that way. And ultimately kind of knowing the majority of how to do the entire post-production process, not all the details. Don't ask me to do visual effects, but I can get the team to get what we need to get done as long as they're active. So yeah, that's what I did from 17 to 40, late 40s. So 30 years until I got married and moved out here to Tennessee. I still do it from time to time. People remember that I do those things, but it's mainly financial and those kinds of things. So it's a lot of fun for me to apply the dormant knowledge and whip out the old gear, most of which I've had to sell off. But I have enough left to be able to do, great music for this also, which was a lot of fun for me to break out the old sounds and kind of take on. I wanted it to be a James Horner kind of a sound, a Star Trek 2 and 3 kind of a feel, because it's much more militaristic. And that really comes from, I think, the emotional tenor of it comes from James Horner's score. So we took kind of the sound that he created orchestrationally and just build a wall-to-wall score there using the Klingon theme from Jerry Goldsmith, which I think is the superior Klingon theme. And then, of course, Alexander Bornstein's Axanar theme, which is great. And then naturally, Star Trek theme shows up at the end. But so it's been fun to do some things that I've heard in JJ Trek. The opening of 2009 Trek, one of the things that you notice if you can get around the guy running around the bridge and doing all the weird stuff that he does in the lens flares, is if you listen, there's so much going on that bridge. There's at least 6 unique elements that immerse you. I love that word, immerse you in that place. And when you study sound design, you realize that the most important thing that we do with sound design is put things in that our brain would normally tune out. Your brain processes 7,000 or so impulses a second, but can only focus on any 3 or 4. And that's what most of our brain tunes things out. So if you remove from your brain the need to tune things out, then it's very difficult for your brain to immerse itself, to be a part of the story. It feels like, oh, I'm not really there. I'm checking my watch, or I'm on my phone or something like this. But if you add elements back in, which drives the sound recorders crazy, because all they're trying to do is mic actors and not have stuff show up. But when you get into post, you put it all back in, the dogs and the ambiances and the weird squeaky shoes and all the stuff. And in this case, I was like, we really need to ramp up the tension. Because if you've ever done a fan film, and if you haven't, you all should.
I've done it. I highly recommend it.
Yes. You have. Then what you notice is it's not a lot of fun to sit on the bridge of your beautiful bridge and shoot, because it's a lot of work and it's boring. If you're watching the camera, you're like, this doesn't look like, how come it doesn't look like a film? How come it doesn't feel like a film? Because you're shooting angles and there's space and there's time and there's no editing. It's just kind of raw. Okay, we're action. And they say their line. Okay, do it again. It's not until you get it edited. And then when you watch the edit, you're like, this feels so flat. It feels slow. It's boring. So I thought you said editing was where you tell the story. Yes, but editing is not where you have the emotion, where you have the immersion. And if you don't have those two things, you're just reading a book. So, acting without sound is stage. Writing without sound is a book. And cinematography without sound, like a good sound treatment, is a silent movie. And those sucked so hard in the early 20th century that they had to have some bozo playing piano or organ to make people interested in keep going. So to me, sound is where the magic happens, where the Hollywood magic really, really happens. And we know everybody's like, oh, visual effects. Well, I mean, they're amazing. I mean, amazing. It's like Christmas morning in a every day when you get visual effects shots, you're like, look at that. That's amazing. But it ain't anything until that immersion is there. And we learned that in 2001 because Blue Danube just ain't that interesting. Anyway, so
2001 the movie, not 2001 the year. I
correct. Yes.
I took a film class back when I lived in New York City at NYU, and I remember once the teacher said, "Okay, quiz from the class." Just wanted a show of hands. Okay, so you can only have in this hypothetical good video with bad sound or good sound with bad video, and which do you choose? And almost everybody in the class said we'd want to have better video quality and bad sound. He said absolutely not. He said good sound will save bad video, but bad sound will kill the best video.
And the best performances and the best everything. We did this on the sound advice tour where I toured North America teaching filmmakers about just that thing. And one of the very first things we did in the first hour was I took a clip from Blade of Honor and messed up the foot. It looked so bad. It was almost, you could almost not tell there was people in the shot. But the sound, we had actually a surround speaker, surround system in the class, and it was like, 96 kilohertz. I mean, it was fantastic. And then and I said, look, George Lucas said sound is at least 50% of the audience experience. He was whimsical. He knows better. He's got Ben Burtt and John Williams hammering the kind of the dumbest story ever, so that you're like, oh, I love it's my favorite movie of all time. And that's not because of the writing or the visual effects. It's those two guys. So, and then you play perfect HD video on a huge screen, and it, you run tones and it's distortion, and people, they can't take it for more than 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Because part of the reason is that, I don't want to get into technical theory, but I'll leave you with this. There's a reason why Disney figured out that you could fool people into believing motion at around 13 different pictures a second. Somewhere around 13, 14, the brain goes, oh, there's motion there. Oh, they're moving. But in the 80s, we discovered that there's no freaking way you're fooling anybody into believing that less than 32,000 frames a second can fool the ear. You got to have at least 32,000 frames a second for your brain to go, that sounds like sound. And now we know that's terrible, that CDs, which sound horrible, are 44.1 thousand. And this, what we're doing here is 48. And when I tell my sound recordist, I'm like, let's record at 96,000 frames a second to fool the ear. So there's a lot more information that your brain tunes out from your ears, which is why it's so much work to make immersion happen in film, but it's so rewarding.
It's very true. I mean, it's certainly, in the ICARUS maneuver, it's so, like I said, I got into a Zen place and I was just kind of absorbing the experience. And I don't, I typically don't watch fan films multiple times. Some I do, but they're fan films.
Yeah.
And this is more than a fan film. This is the freaking work of art, dude.
Thank you.
So,
I will tell you, one of the secrets that makes the bridge much less boring is I had Dana over the Thanksgiving break in 23. He had a bunch of people over, and he has he's doing the audio drama recording and has a nice little studio he built. God bless him. And I said, how many people? He's like, oh, I've got maybe, 7 or 8. I'm like, I'm going to give you this huge script of call outs, of crazy techno babble call outs. And I want you to do a yellow alert version of them and red alert versions of them, where they're like, And so I have all these regular old folks doing a pretty good job of sounding like regular old folks, which I don't want actors.
Right.
And if you listen in the background, if you watch it again, you'll hear nonstop call outs. And that was what was available that I didn't think about until I watched 2009 Trek, what JJ or that sound team did really ramp up. And the music's great too, but the oh shoot, we're in big trouble, we're dying here, it comes from those little call outs that are just constantly going on. And it's part of that immersive experience that you don't hear. Although there's one guy, I think it's Dana, who goes, confirm Icarus maneuver. You can actually hear him right before Alex says, execute or something. But other than that, it's just a hum in the background. So
yeah, no, I call that actually background chatter when I did interlude. But we did that as well. I had, I think, 7 or 8 different friends literally record for me dialogue, and I had 24, 25 different little things, like emergency power at 68%.
Well, we spent, as I recall, we spent no small amount of time recutting those little backgrounds to make them just right.
We did.
Yeah.
And the thing was is that certain ones were better than others, but that's why I had eight people read the exact same script so that, you know, it wouldn't be the same person saying the same thing. So we could mix and match. Even I was even one of them.
Well, I was just going to
Um,
say, if you listen carefully, go back to watch interlude, you'll hear Jonathan in there in the
I'm in
background.
there.
Com, get me the Artemis.
Red line, ventral conduit
Captain.
2.
And amusingly, Josh Irwin still uses those for the Avalon universe. If you watch
Oh,
some of the
is that
Avalon
right?
stuff,
That's right.
Avalon actually has a new episode coming out very soon.
Mhm.
Le Mort de Guerre, the death of war, and yeah, you can hear me in one of those because he uses the same background things, background chatter to just fill out the immersiveness of the bridge, but not nearly. I mean, yours was just a whole other level.
There's a lot of I'm in Pro Tools for those of you who know what that is, and I'm mixing. I think I've got about 260 channels to do Icarus, and that's a short film. And so when we do features, we're into the thousands of tracks. So yeah.
How many channels did you have for interlude? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, I don't remember actually. It wasn't going to be less than 200. There's no way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I know that you were a little frustrated. We were going to do an interview at one point for Interlude Confidential, where I was going to talk to Mark about the sound design for it, and it never happened only because I had such trouble. I wanted to talk to Kevin Croxton, my composer. And Kevin's just his father died, and then he was his Indiana Jones thing. But we were going to talk to Kevin first about the music, and then you about putting the music together. And I know that one of the things that you were frustrated with is that you never got the stems from Kevin on that, and the stems are basically when you take the music and you just you isolate out certain instruments and whatever, and Mark could mix those as well. All Mark had was the levels. But I remember what Mark said to me in Interlude. The first thing that he asked when he did it is he said, I think you used the word immersive. Do you want this to be what was the choice you get? It could be
it's either emotion
or
immersion. Yeah.
or immersion.
What do you want the audience to feel?
Yeah.
Right.
And so I had no idea what this meant. So he said, well, let me explain. So emotional means that you're really feeling what they're feeling. You have a visual experience to it. Immersive means you're there, you're in the action, everything is happening. I said, oh well, I certainly want to be in the action. Let's be in the action. And so Mark gave me a cut that was immersion, and you couldn't hear the music.
Mm-mm.
And I was like, well, the music's amazing. I mean, I had, an Emmy winning, it was a regional Emmy, but it was an Emmy, composer making my music. I thought my music for Interlude was amazing. And I got this cut where most of the time you couldn't hear the music because you were so immersed in the sound effects. And I was like, okay, Mark, that wasn't what I wanted. God bless you for not getting this to me for saying that.
I had my moments, but it's also what happens. I just get mad and then I get over it and we go do it. It's fine. It's fine. But it's most people don't realize that sound is broken into three things: story, immersion, emotion. And the three aspects of sound that do that the best are dialogue, sound effects, ambiences, all that go with it, Foley, and then the music. And yes, of course, my writers are going to be like, well, but what do you mean? Dialogue can create emotion. Of course it can. But you have to have a great performance and great writing and the camera position the right thing. Whereas you can have any dumb ass composer move one note and you feel something different on a bad sound. So music is meant for emotion. Sound effects is meant for immersion, but we can't have everything up loud.
Yeah.
And dialogue always has, unless you're Christopher Nolan, thank you very much. Dialogue has to be loud enough to be able to be discerned so the story can unfold. And then the fight is the other two. Which one from moment to moment? And what do you want your audience to feel? Do you want, because music, you could have a horror scene and somebody's getting their neck chopped and blood everywhere. But if you're playing polka music, everybody's laughing. Just like that. Like,
yes.
And like, that's funny. Look at that blood. So music's like a thumb that just goes, whatever I say, that's what the audience is going to feel. So we got to be careful about that. But if you just do music, then it's melodrama. It's like daytime soaps. So we got to have the immersion so people are there. And especially on a Star Trek set, you want to be like a whole new world, or a fantasy set. You want to be in all of it, and the weird surrounding birds and the surround channels and all that other stuff, crickets. And the bits and the bops and the UI systems and all that other, the warp. I had Dana design a special hum of the warp core that when he goes full impulse or when he says, you know, Icarus maneuver, do this, and you can hear it rise and it actually ebbs and flows. And all that stuff that your brain's tuning out drops you into what's going to happen next. I'm really into this. Even if it's a bad story and bad visuals, I'm here. I don't want to go anywhere. I love this place. So that's what I'm always telling directors when I used to do mixing for a living. I'm like, you can't have both. You got to fix one or the other. Which one are we biased toward? Not like you mute one, obviously, but where are we biased? And that helps kind of solve the jargon.
And I learned that lesson early. I pissed off my sound designer, but he forgave me.
Well, that's why we don't have sound designers and composers doing the final mix. Like I did a version I posted on Facebook last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. I'm so in love with my music. I love this music. It's so fun to do in the Star Trek world. But I'm also the composer and the director and the editor and the producer and the mixer. It's all the things you should never do. And I remember posting on Facebook like, I've now reached a place where I'm so in love with my music and I can't really hear the dialogue right, and the immersion is not quite right, but I'm not going to pull down the music. So I'm like, I have to take off the composer hat. I have to do something else now. So it's working out though.
But no, the music the music is great, and the music for Interlude was great, and the sound. I mean, everything came together for both films. So and you're looking at pretty much the guy who's responsible for both those being amazing. Although obviously there's lots of other people who were also responsible for this being amazing, and I wanted to call out the actors actually because there were some really, really good performances. I didn't realize it was like little short snippets or whatever, but I mean everybody did a really, really good job, or if they didn't do a good job, they were at least okay, Alec. But
Alec did great. Alec
did great. I'm kidding.
Yeah. So what's great about that is that Rob Hayes, we'd shot Rob Hayes out the year before for Axanar, so he knew his character. He almost didn't need any direction. And
Rob Hayes is the pilot, DeVille.
The pilot, so, yeah. And then Vince, who was first officer, he replaced I can't remember his name. Chooch. Anyway.
Yes. We'll put that in there.
It'll come to me. He replaced him because we brought him in because the other gentleman wasn't available. So we brought him in just to be a younger version, but he was so good. We're like, wait, just roll him into the rest of the weekend. So
Vince was also the Ephrosion.
He was the Ephrosion. Yeah.
But he looked so much like the actor James Lou.
James well done.
Lou. Yes,
well done.
We did it. Well done. James Lou, but he looked so much like James Lou that it was so easy to just swap him out.
And his performance just kind of unrehearsed was so raw and so great. And then Adrian's so brilliant. She's just unstoppably brilliant.
Corax.
As Corax, and Haley, who she's kind of a character actor everywhere in Atlanta. She just everywhere she goes. Now, I don't work in Atlanta very often, but Jeff, our DTP, is like, I've worked with her a lot. She's great. And at one point, because she's got no small amount of very important dialogue and reactions. Like
she's Tara Wagner. She's the woman in the red shirt for everybody.
In the red on the at ops.
At tactical. At ops.
Tactical. Sorry.
Tactical,
yeah. Tactical. And
I need all these things. Somebody somewhere.
So, and I remember like the first few shots, I was like, something's not right. I don't know why. She's got a vision of it and it's going here. And I told Jeff, I'm like, I'm not sure this is what I want. He's like, oh, dude, just tell her exactly what you want and you're going to get it. I'm like, really? He goes, oh yeah, just go tell her. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, can we just do this? And she's like, oh yeah. And then for the rest of the shoot, I'm like, wow, this is great. This is great. Like there's a reaction shot of her right before they start the Icarus maneuver, and I cut the reactions, and her reaction, just this super subtle, just looking up at the screen. And I'm like, oh, it's so perfect. It's so great. Who else do we have in there? Well, that's the big cast. And then of course, Alec, we shot Alec's Axanar stuff a year later. So Alec, God bless him, had to, slim down, which is not pleasant if you've ever tried to do that for a film role. And just for that day, and he looks great. And so that's great. I will say something else that we lit for red, like really red, like probably way too red, redder than I wanted. But we had no time and no money to fix it and not a lot of gear. So we shot it I was never really happy. It was like so red. It's basically bicolor. It's black and red in so many ways. So, and although that is very Hunt for Red October and Das Boot, it's not really what I wanted. So I've been with Axanar the longest, but the second longest person is Bing Bailey in Los Angeles, who's been color correction and so many other things actually for Prelude. So I sent it to him and I go, oh, what are we going to do? He's like, oh, I know what to do. And he added all this color and all this beautiful stuff that was just, I mean, obviously we shot in red, so we have full, what's the word I want? Latitude. But he pulled out, it looks like a submarine war film.
It really does.
And it just lines up perfectly with that. We're stuck in this little tin can, and although we won't implode, we will explode, and we'll get all thrown out in space. It's the same danger, whether you're in space or at 20,000 fathoms. The exterior is not habitable. So I love that. Thank you, Bing.
Thank you, Bing.
Inertial dampeners down. Secondaries online.
Bridge engineering. Alexei, we just lost it.
I'm on it. 5 minutes.
And I also need...
Reserve power to phasers.
Mr. DeVille, get us 50 clicks above the nearest D6. ICARUS maneuver on my mark.
Z plus 50 clicks. Aye, sir.
All right. So before we finish up, I want to ask about Axanar, the two Axanar sequel films. So how are they? Alex says they're going to be ready by this summer. Okay. It is now, as we're recording this, it is March 20th. Are we going to make it?
Well, we're basically we're in the usual chute, CHUTE, of post-production. We're waiting on models to be redone and some of the shots to be flown off the line. So I think there's a good chance of it. I think we're too early in the schedule for me to say absolutely now, because we've had a couple of little setbacks here and there. But on the post side from audio, we're in great shape there. So I would say ask me on May 1st, and then I can tell you absolutely which way we're going to be for sure. Because at that point we have to build Blu-rays as well. So that takes time to author, and everything has to be in place by then. So, and we also have a planned mix at the end of, in mid-June in Los Angeles, the final mix for both episodes, back at the same place we mixed Prelude, which is my favorite mixing house in all Los Angeles. So I'm very
What does that
excited
mean? You have to do a mix. What is
so we
that?
take all, like what we've been talking about, we take all the elements, all the, like in Icarus, there's 200 and odd tracks, and mix them all into something that sounds cohesive, which a lot of people just move faders around, and that's not the way you mix. You use EQs and you change the contour. So you and I have been talking, well, if I was going to add music to this, I wouldn't just take the music and just put it in, because I'd have to mix it so low that it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. So I have to actually carve out your and my voice in the music. We carve that out of the music, the sonic signature of your voice and mine. And then that way we can raise the rest of the music up so that it's much more audible, but it doesn't conflict or get perpendicular to what we're trying to say dialogue-wise. So that's one simple example, but compound that over hundreds of tracks, and for a 15-minute short, probably 300 or 400 tracks. So then we need to do that in a soundproof environment that's tuned for sound, because it has to translate to not just here on our computers or the YouTube, which is where it'll live, but also festivals. And we're also going to mix it in 5.1 surround, just like I did with Icarus, because Icarus is going to be, hopefully, if it all works out, 4 or 5 festivals, so you can go see it in the theater where it was designed to be seen. So, it's a very complex, my favorite thing to do process, and we get to do it at a studio that I used to work at. Michael Lehman Boddicker, who is one of my dearest friends and one of the most talented musicians and composers. He has this incredible room there, and so it'll be fun. If that makes sense.
Come and watch?
You can. You come out. Oh yeah, you're in LA. Of course you can.
I'm in LA.
I'm like, where are you? Oh no, you're right there. Of course.
I'm right there.
Yeah.
Probably walk there. No, I can't.
So some of the donors, the large format donors will probably come in, because it is an experience. He's got a 35-foot screen, and it's incredible, that place. So
yeah, because I haven't seen that Axanar cut that everybody keeps talking about. There's that assembled print that I've heard about it.
In surround, you mean?
No, not even in surround. I haven't actually seen that assembled cut of Axanar yet.
Oh, you're talking about the assemblies.
Yeah, the assemblies. I mean,
well, the assemblies aren't worth watching yet. They're still not worth watching.
No, but I mean, so I'm going to go into this, you know, into the, assuming that you invite me, which you now have. So, Alec, you can't keep me away. And you know, so this will be, you know, going into Axanar cold. I will not have seen anything. So this will be really cool.
Well, if you show up on those days, any of those days, you will see everything visually assembled and put in place. It will be the visuals. It'll just be a lot of monotony, listening to all kinds of little things like we're going to have to do Foley on people moving. Like you can't hear this on my mic, but the jacket I'm making makes a lot of noise by moving. So we have to do all of that. We'll be listening to that and creating ambiances and surround and, you know, and then not to mention the massive sound design that's going to have to go in some of these battle sequences. I mean, I have, in this short Icarus, I have a battle sequence that is 46 tracks deep. Wow. That's pretty good, but we only have 3 ships. There's not more than 3 ships rolling. Well, in some of these other, I can tell you, we're going to be looking at dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of ships, not just hanging out, but flying through and moving past, and not just 2 different classes of ships, but we've got D4s and D5s and D6s and D7s and Ares class and the Geronimo, and I mean, it's every ship has its own unique sound signature, and it's a lot. It's going to be so fun. That's my favorite things.
Yeah. And by the way, I do not mind the monotony, although my family does, because I remember when we were editing Interlude and, you know, they were hearing the same little snippet of like 3.5 seconds of dialogue over and over and over again. And Jaden's room was right upstairs from where I was editing, and he would just finally, like, you know, slam his door. You know, it's like, I don't want to hear it anymore.
Yeah, I know. People are like, oh, that sounds fun. Sure, you can come hang out and bring your edit bay to my house. I'm like, you have no idea what's about to happen to you.
All right, so fingers crossed on Axanar coming out this summer, but it sounds like, you know, even if it doesn't hit this summer, I even mentioned to Alec, you know, technically September 8th, the anniversary of Star Trek is still summer. Right. You know, of course, the end of the year is fine too. Who cares? I live in Los Angeles. It's going to do the Man Chinese, you know, theater. Yeah. So
the only thing that could possibly hold it up is the massive amount of visual effects shots that we have. Just we have hundreds of visual effect shots.
Hopefully you were riding your VFX guy or guys, you know,
guys
daily and gals and whatever else. But yeah, because that was one of the things that held up Interlude as well. Not really held it up, but I mean, you know, we had a lot of shots as well. We didn't have nearly as many shots as you did, but you know that, you know, getting those shots that was you know, everything else is in the can, everything else is ready, but
yeah,
you know, the VFX shots. All right, so final question, which is, now that you have done the Icarus maneuver, obviously, you know, the precedent is now set, Interlude, Icarus maneuver, whatever. Will there be any other potential Axanar adjacent fan films of a fan film that might be coming out in the future? And actually, I'm already going to answer this question because I know that Josh Irwin is working on an Axanar universe fan film. Actually, I think he's working on an Avalon universe.
I know he's doing that, but I also know there were 2 large portions of what we had wished to put into these 2 15-minute Axanar episodes that we said, no, we just can't. And as we continue to work with it, we're like, but these are very, very important stories to tell. You know, these are stories that we just can't tell. And Alec is out of his fresh out of, you know, potential guideline fan films he can do. So, you know, Josh stepped up and he said, well, because I wanted to do Icarus. I'm like, this is passionate for me. And so Josh is going to do, for now, it's not even a working title. It's like a code name. It's the Battle of the Gas Giant. So he's going to be doing that. I don't know anything about his release. I think in 2 weeks he's shooting. So he's still in principal photography on that one. I know he's also doing his Avalon, the Universe Genius work. So that's there. For me, we've talked about another one, but I have so many personal projects, none of the least of which is I still have 2 episodes of a motion comic for donors from Omega 1 that I have to produce. And I know for those of you like, when is that coming out? I know I'm years overdue, but it is my intention to do that. once this is out and I'm out of this, then in between my Axanar duties, which right now aren't all that much while we wait for visual effect shots, I will be diving back into Omega 1 to get that finished. And then, I will say one other thing that most people, you might not know. Are you aware of what a blaster beam is?
A blaster beam. It sounds cool, but I do not know what it is.
If you think of the motion picture, you think of V'ger, you think of that sound.
Like that, yeah.
That's made by a thing called a blaster beam, 24 strings on a 16-foot piece of aluminum. It's huge, and it makes these massive noises, and you take a big cylinder and you slide it around. Well, my brother built one. It's in Orange County, and it's in this score. If you listen, so you don't have to listen very hard. So we have some of those sounds. And of course, James Horner used it in 2 and 3. They used it in 6. They use it in all of Picard. They use it all over the place now. It's become kind of the Star Trek thing, although other people use it. They use it in Transformers. And it's an incredible instrument. If you ever get the chance to go fool around with one or find one, there's only a few in the world now. They're really fun. And I'm very proud to have that unique tapestry, that unique element in there for the score. So that's cool.
Awesome. So the answer to the question, will there be other Axanar adjacent fan films coming out? The answer is yes. Will Mark be working on any of the
It won't be
adjacent?
until after Axanar is done. There's no way. I got way too little bandwidth, and this has been great fun. I'm very proud of it. And I'm now going to put the rest of my energy into being very proud of Axanar itself.
As well you should be. We're all looking forward to it. Well, Mark, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. Once again, aplausos for an amazing fan film to add to so many amazing fan films that are out there already. And anyway, I wish you all the best in the future for whatever you're going to be doing.
Thank you, good
I
sir.
just know it'll be busy.
Thank you, good sir. Thanks for having me.
Take care, Mark.